So by this point in time, what can you say about the TV show South Park that hasn't already been said? The show's been on the air for roughly 30 years now. It's made hundreds of episodes. It's criticized and satirized so many subjects. And one of those things is global warming and the idea of it even existing in the first place. Or at least that's the belief in the narrative by fans of the show, which, you know, if true, is very concerning. However, is that actually the case? What am I talking about? Why am I here? Because I knew that, obviously, global warming, massive issue. South Park, massive platform. And there was this belief that South Park had attacked the idea of global warming existing and made it sound silly and stupid. And I was curious to find out if that was true, because like I said, as a kid, when I watched it as a kid, don't read too much into that. As a kid, when I watched ManBearPig, I didn't see that as a global warming metaphor. Is it one? And if it is the message attached to it online true? So I did some research and I came across many episodes in which South Park discussed the idea of global warming. I decided to watch all of them. I also decided for good measure to listen to all of the DVD commentaries to see what the actual purpose of the episodes were, if they are misconstrued, and then figure out if the apology episode, which we will get to in season 22, was actually apologizing for what everybody thought it was. I also for good measure watched both Inconvenient Truth films. That's right, there's 2 of them. I'm sure a lot of you didn't know that. There are many episodes of South Park which are about global warming, which sounds bad, but when you realize that this show has been going on for, like I said, hundreds of episodes, most of which made within a 6-day period where they try and keep up to date with the most recent stuff in the news and how big of an issue climate change and global warming and all this stuff is, it becomes less surprising and less of a that's weird and more of a okay, that makes sense. For example, the first episode of South Park, which revolves around anything climate change related, Stan and Cartman steal a boat, they end up crashing into a dam, it floods a nearby town. They allow the adults of South Park to believe that it was done by climate change. The adults are then afraid of climate change as if it's some monster, ignoring all proof that the issue clearly isn't climate change, which can easily be considered from a viewer as taking the piss out of climate change existing at all. We didn't listen! It is important once again to consider when this episode came out, back when climate change wasn't believed as much as it is now by the general public. You see, after listening to the DVD commentaries of this episode, it becomes clear that this was made within that 6-day period, as mentioned, of Hurricane Katrina. The resemblance of the flood becomes a lot more clear. The creators of the show, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, felt like they had to make an episode on Katrina due to that was kind of the thing they did, but didn't know how to do it in a way that wasn't just extremely distasteful. As a result, they used the general idea of it to take the piss out of a movie they have just seen, that being The Day After Tomorrow, which in their own words treats global warming as the antagonist in a way which they thought was just bad filmmaking and they just thought was funny to mock, basically. The second episode, which touches on climate change, is even more specifically pro being careful of climate change. The episode is called Smug Alert, where loads of people in the town decide to buy hybrid cars, making them really cocky, creating an equivalent of smog over the town called Smug, and then it becomes a whole thing. This show's stupid, okay? The commentaries, once again, which is where I'm getting a lot of this information, by the way, straight from the source, talk about their experiences with people in San Francisco who are very rich and think they're doing a lot by owning hybrid cars, despite the fact that they are taking part in a lot of other damage to the environment. In the episode itself, it ends with the characters talking about the fact that it's okay to try and support climate change, to try and fix stuff by owning hybrid cars, but you just shouldn't be cocky about it. That's it. Now we'll move on to the big thing being ManBearPig. The episode is based on taking the piss out of Al Gore, who had recently made the documentary in which he presents to the public a PowerPoint about how bad climate change is, certain effects of it, and the future prediction of what would happen. ManBearPig is the metaphor for global warming. Al Gore comes to the town, tells the kids and the town people about how bad this thing is going to be, even though that there's no proof of it. This is the biggest thing which can be considered to be, look at this idiot talking about something that isn't real. However, listen to the commentaries, the main issue that the people of South Park had was actually just with the documentary itself. Not really because of what was mentioned, more just the fact that they thought it was an extremely lazy piece of filmmaking and used the episode to more take the piss out of Al Gore himself and the film he made, not really what the film is about. However, inadvertently, by mocking both of these things and having the episode released around the time it was, comes across to be mocking exactly that as well, which kind of became the main takeaway from this episode. The next time we see this character of ManBearPig was in Imagination Land Part 2, where you actually see the character for the first time. You could perceive it as slightly pushing this narrative of climate change isn't real, due to the fact that we only see ManBearPig because he comes out of Imagination Land, and with the knowledge that ManBearPig is a a metaphor for global warming, you can kind of make that interpretation. However, from the creators' voices, it was more so an inclusion just because they saw it as an opportunity to include a in-world imaginary character. They just wanted to show this character because they like the character. It's not that deep, unfortunately. Finally, we move on to the big episode, which I would argue pushes this idea even more. With Time to Get Serial and Nobody Got Serial being a part 1 and part 2 of a dual episode storyline years after these prior episodes. ManBearPig is now real. They go to Al Gore for help. Al Gore is kind of deservedly very smug about it, saying, I was right the whole time, none of you believed me. And the episodes kind of consist of the kids trying to figure out how to get rid of ManBearPig, why it exists. The power of this character is shown with the fact that he just massacres so many people. He fights Satan and kills him. You learn about the fact that he used to terrorize the town in previous generations. The way that generation got rid of them was by pushing them on to the next generation's problems to get rid of the things that they liked, replicated by the end of the episode where this generation is given the chance to get rid of ManBearPig once and for all. The terms global warming and ManBearPig from this point are kind of interchangeable. It's a very funny and relevant discussion point compared to the previous episodes of the show, which touched on global warming but didn't massively make a serious point out of it. It makes sense that this appears to be one big apology episode for the way that they handled global warming in the past and the stance they took. Interestingly, the DVD commentary to these episodes doesn't say a lot. They don't really discuss the topics of the episode and kind of push it off as like, yeah, it didn't really age well. Now, there is one more appearance of ManBearPig. He has a child called Chuck and he has like a human wife and it doesn't mean anything. Now we've watched all the episodes, we can come to a conclusion that South Park isn't anti-global warming. With the context of when these episodes were released, the creators' mindsets going into them, their intentions, that's not the case. However, that said, was the impact of these episodes still a problem? Many papers and articles over the years have done research into exactly how media can affect those viewing it, a lot of the time agreeing that it can have an impact on those watching. With a lot of the cause of this said to be due to ritualistic viewing, implying that effects can happen on viewers whether or not they were intended to be there or not. These impacts include social changes and also political changes, with it being referred to as pervasive influence. And with how big of a platform South Park is, how infamous the character of ManBearPig became, and how attached it became to the character of Al Gore himself as a person, I don't think it's too far of a reach to say that these episodes very likely had an impact on people. The episodes do make Al Gore and his documentaries look silly, and with the context of how important the discussion points of the documentaries are, that could easily be perceived as people believing that the entirety of the documentary is silly. Other media echoed this response. Now, of course, you can make jokes about serious topics, but there can still be an impact of that. But it's important to state that the South Park creators have never pretended to take a stance in their episodes. In fact, they have made it very clear in many interviews that they are a purely apolitical show. While it's true that they will make episodes mocking the left, they will also make episodes mocking the right. They will make episodes mocking everything and anything, and that is kind of their point that they try to bring across. With all that said, I can come to this conclusion because I've watched the entire show. I've listened to the DVD commentaries, I have researched, I have known about these people for a long time, I've watched the documentaries they are talking about. I'm coming from an educated standpoint of saying these episodes are not anti-global warming. The general audience just see the episodes once or twice. They will just hear about a thing. They won't fully go into what it's about, why it's about that, what they're talking about, the context of their release. A lot of people won't watch those documentaries. I hadn't, and that's kind of one of the biggest problems with this. Are the South Park creators doing anything particularly wrong making these episodes where they are? No. However, there is an impact to everything we do. Talking about really serious topics can have an impact. This video could have an impact. Having big audiences is an impactful thing, a dangerous thing in some ways. And of course, the South Park creators have always talked about serious topics, and they always come up with a place of comedy. In the current day and age, we are learning that sometimes unwanted impacts can happen by discussing serious topics in ways that aren't necessarily responsible. Does that mean it should stop? Does that mean it should continue only if you're educated? That's not my place to say. However, I think it's just something to keep in mind if you're a creator mocking something adjacent to an issue. Maybe there's a better way of making it explicit that you're not mocking the issue itself. To conclude, if you want to educate yourself about an issue, do it. If you don't think you know enough about an issue to have an opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to have an opinion about every serious subject. These things are serious and they should be considered seriously as a result. And if you see a piece of media that seems to be against something or seems to be showing that something is wrong or silly and that it's coming from from a show made purely for entertainment and not education. Do some research on it. Come to your own conclusion. But that's just my opinion. I would highly recommend that you go and watch all these episodes I've just mentioned and both documentaries if you're interested in the subject and make your own conclusions from it. Be careful, look after yourself and look after the world. Bye.